What's for dinner? It's a question we have all heard before. This is Tomah Health Marketing Director Eric Price. In this edition of HealthCheck 360, we present an installment of our Tomah Health Community Outreach class, What's for Dinner? Learn how to maximize nutrition, reduce costs, and always have something for dinner in your pantry. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Michelle Lindsay. I'm the Director of Nutrition at Tomah Health, and I've been an outpatient clinical dietitian, an inpatient clinical dietitian. I've done oncology, diabetes, weight management, kind of like the run of everything. Right now I just focus on culinary nutrition. I'm a member of the Culinary Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group, and I'm really privileged just to be able to kind of focus on food at Tomah Health right now. So it's been a really fun role for me for like the last 6 years or so. Whitney and I decided to start a series of classes because there was a big demand and people were asking for classes on cooking and nutrition. And kind of when we thought about that, we're like, well, where do we start? And I thought the good place to start was a class on pantries. And I want to tell you kind of why. Alice Waters says, good food depends almost entirely on good ingredients. And this is something in the culinary world they say all the time. If you're going to make good food, you have to start with good ingredients. In the same way, in nutrition, if you're making good choices with the things that you purchase, you're going to be steps ahead on the nutrition game as well as the flavor game, right? So that's why we wanted to start with choosing the right ingredients before we even really got to a lot of cooking. When you're talking about nutrition, we're not talking about perfection. We're just talking about patterns. Like, how would you look? How would you describe your diet like 1,000 feet above? Is it generally good? Is it generally bad? Getting into the weeds too much isn't good for anyone's mental health. And so I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on anything, and I don't think you should either in your personal life. And eating should be for pleasure, and that's really why I like focusing on culinary nutrition. Nothing I'm going to talk to you about today isn't rooted in what tastes good, what tastes, maybe not to you necessarily, but that's where I'm coming from. I'm not going to be talking about practices that we do just because we have to. I want to talk about the pleasurable parts of eating and how to put those into practice in your house. I just kind of want to run you down what we're going to talk about: salts, fats, acids, sweeteners, fruits, nuts and seeds, legumes, and whole grains. And the reason I wanted to start here is because, like I said, this is about my 4th or 5th professional kitchen now. And every time I start a kitchen, I end up in the pantry first. You always build your pantry first. You can build up a pantry that can set you up for success cooking every night. You're steps ahead, because everything else comes and goes, but your pantry stuff sticks around for a long time, right? For the last 50 years, dietitians have been trying to get people to eat less salt, eat less salt, eat less salt, and it has done nothing but not work. Everyone is eating way more salt than ever. Yes, Americans eat way too much salt, but 70 to 80% of the salt that Americans have in their diet is from processed food, and it's from restaurant food. If you're cooking your food from home and scratch, you really don't need to worry about it, right? It's never going to reach anywhere near the amount of salt from those sources. Basically, salt is sodium chloride. It's something that we need to maintain our blood pressures. But in food, what salt does is it enhances the flavor of other things, right? It has a taste of its own, but it minimizes bitterness. There's actually studies with little kids that if kids are given salted vegetables, they'll eat more vegetables than if they weren't, because it cancels out some of the bitter. It enhances sweetness. And actually some chefs, they can smell if something needs more salt, because it enhances the smells of our food, which enhances the flavor, right? So salt is like super amazing ingredient, and it's an art. And if you want to know a lot about salting, this book I cannot recommend more. It's all about how to use salt appropriately in your food, and it's just a wealth of knowledge in there. All right, so there's a lot of different choices of salt in the grocery store. Probably the one that you're all most familiar with is just like your basic iodized salt. Iodized salt is, it's iodized, right? It has iodine added to it. Around World War I, like 30% of the men that reported to war had like big goiters on their neck if they were from Michigan and stuff. And the American government was like, oh my God, we need to do something. And so they started to put iodine in salt as a voluntary thing to get people to get their goiters down. And this causes like low IQ, it causes hypothyroidism. It's a really bad public health problem, but we pretty much eliminated that problem. But we still have iodized salt everywhere. The next is kosher salt. This is a really clean tasting salt. It's just salt that's used in like koshering traditional. The two big players on the market are Morton salt and Diamond Crystal. Diamond Crystal salt is kind of the darling of the chef world, and a lot of chefs use Diamond Crystals. If you're looking at a recipe and it says salt, If you're like by default using iodized salt, you might be using 2 times more of the salt than that person at least intended for you to use in that recipe, right? So it's something to consider. They're not interchangeable. It's true that Himalayan salt, or I imagine Celtic salt, has a higher mineral content than other salts. But here's the thing. You're never going to be eating enough salt, or you shouldn't be, to get that to be like an appreciable difference in your diet, right? I like Himalayan salt because it looks pretty in my grinder. And I think that it does have a really good flavor. And so I would think based on that, choose a salt that you like the flavor, you like the way it looks, and that's great. But just know that there's no benefit really from one salt to another salt. Except if you have a goiter and then you want iodized salt. Sea salt, kind of along the same lines as kosher salt, really similar. There's a really beautiful salt that's coming around in that muffin tin. And there's different salts like flaked sea salts and that kind of thing. And they're very expensive, right? And you're not going to use those as, dissolved into anything else because it would be just an absolute waste. You're buying those because of the texture. They're meant to be eaten whole, like put on top of cookies or like put on top of like a green salad or something. The texture is the point. And so you wouldn't want to waste those. And one of the salts that comes through there has like a beautiful pyramid shape to it. And the mouthfeel is why you buy that kind of salt, or why you would use that kind of salt. So here's that conversion I was talking about. There's no issue with any of these salts. The point is really just to know your salt, choose a salt that you like, but understand that they are not interchangeable. There are a lot of foods that you have in your pantry, that you have in your refrigerator, that are inherently salty, but they're bringing something else to the table, right? So this is a list of those kinds of foods. Can you tell me anything you see here? A lot of them are fermented, right? Which means they have active cultures in it, and we're learning a lot more about how those active cultures can get into our guts and have beneficial impacts for us, right? So there's a lot of cultured foods there. There's also straight up just a lot of vegetables, right? There's sauerkraut, kimchi, seaweed, pickles, right? Those are all vegetables. Yeah, they're fermented. Yeah, they're pickled. They're heavily salted, but they are vegetables, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can sneak more nutrients into your food and use them as a salt. Anchovies, you might think that you don't like anchovies, and I think you might be wrong. If you like, seriously, if you like Caesar dressing, if you like Worcestershire sauce, if you like that kind of flavor, that's what anchovies are, right? That is like a chef's secret weapon. Right? And there's a ton of omega-3. There's a ton of calcium in there. So slipping those into like sauces and things like that, where you're not even going to notice that they're there, but you're getting that salt, you're getting omega-3, you're getting calcium, is like a really fun trick, right? Winnie gave you capers because we had a lot of questions like, what is a caper? And it's kind of like really an alternative to pickles. I like to throw it in like tuna salad or into any kind of pasta dish where I want maybe like just like a burst of like brine or something, because it's a good contrast to something really heavy. So those are there for you to try. It's actually a pickled flower bud, which I always thought was kind of cool. That's what a caper actually is. Another great thing, seaweed. Seaweed is an amazing food. It's super high in vitamin C. It's really high in protein, a really good source of iodine. It's super salty because it grows in the ocean. These are like dark leafy greens of the sea. So I've been working a lot at home just to try to use seaweed in a different kind of way at home to bring more salt to a dish while also bringing something else with it. They make a lot of really cool like seasoning, like Japanese seasonings that are like salt, but like half seaweed, that like bring a lot of umami flavor to things that are really fun. And then miso. Miso is something that you have in front of you also. Does anyone know what miso is? It's a fermented soybean. So it's kind of miso is a triple threat, and that's why I want to talk about it, because not only is it a legume, it's fermented and it lasts for an absolute eternity in your refrigerator. I use miso often in a soup, especially if it's like an Asian flavored soup, just like you would like better than bouillon or something as like a broth. You can use it as a broth base. You can mix it with, oh, you like it? It's strong. Yeah, it's strong. I'll like half like mix it with butter and half miso, and then I'll broil fish with it, or just put it on vegetables or something. Or I'll mix it into rice if I'm making like a rice bowl. Some really kind of fun thing, there's a study about miso, because in Japan, people wake up and have like a cup of miso soup like you and I have coffee. And they're like, how do these people not just have crazy hypertension running around? Like, how are you just, because it's super salty, right? But there's compounds in the soy that have anti-hypertensive effects. So actually the people that were having this pretty mega dose of sodium, but because it was in the source of miso, actually balanced out and actually was more protective than not in having miso in their diet. So it's just a really cool, interesting, powerful food that I wanted to highlight because a lot of people haven't tried it. These are kind of a salty food, so this is kind of like a weird segue. But canned fish, right? I think for a long time, a lot of people were really afraid of canned fish because there was like mercury contamination, and also just kind of not looked at as like a kind of a yucky kind of food. And I'm like trying really hard in this class and other classes to make canned fish a thing, because it is. It is. I cannot tell you how many times like a dusty can of tuna saved me from going through a Culver's drive-thru at night with my kids. So many, like so many. And there's such a great food. This is a really cool chart I just want to show people. On this axis here, this is omega-3. So this is really high in omega-3. Here's mercury, right? So up here, we have the lowest content of mercury, you have the highest content of omega-3, and these are these things right here. So your salmon, tuna, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, skipjack. These are really wonderful, safe, affordable, which we all need right now, foods. I think in the recipe book that we made so big that we did not give to you tonight because we couldn't print them all off. There's a lot of recipes that have tuna and salmon as a base. You know, and they're not like what you think. It's not like old-timey like tuna noodle casserole. You know, they're elegant and kind of more upscale, but they're using cans of tuna or cans of salmon, and I think they're worth looking out. You can sub mackerel or salmon for tuna in anything. I think people forget about that a lot. Or you can actually blend up sardines into a sauce. This sounds gross. If you eat at the hospital, I've done it to you more than several times. All right, so the recommendation right now from the American Heart Association is to replace your bad fats with good fats. And I'm kind of just do a really quick primer, really quick overview of the different kinds of fats that we have, and then we could move on to some more fun stuff with that. So here at the bottom are trans fats. Now, the United States outlawed trans fats to be in food in like 2015 or something. But that doesn't mean they're gone, because there's a tricky loophole where if there's less than, 5 grams? 0.5 grams? Less than 0.5 grams of trans fats in a serving of your food, they can count it as 0. Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? So they're still out there. They're in some foods, and you'll find it listed as partially hydrogenated fats. So you think about this a lot of times in something that's easy to spread, like peanut butter. That's where they're going to use it. So trans fats, the effect they have on our cholesterol is that they raise your bad cholesterol and they lower your good. So they're doing nothing good for you. That's why the United States outlawed them several years ago. And they're not natural. They don't naturally occur. They're factory made, right? Saturated fats, these are the ones that are like in animal products, so like meat and dairy, those are all saturated fats. Palm and coconut oil, so they're in some plant foods, but these are fats that are solid at room temperature, so like butter, lard. They raise your total and they raise your bad. They don't really do anything to your good, they just kind of work on the bad stuff for you. So then moving on really quick to polyunsaturated. So the American Heart Association is saying get rid of these and replace them with these up here. So these polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, these are your liquid oils, right? These are all of your liquid oils. Polyunsaturated fats aren't bad. They're kind of neutral, right? These are like your corn oils, your soybean oil, like that. Is that what you were just talking about? Corn oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil. We get a lot of these in our diet because they're used in processed foods a lot. And when we get a really bad ratio of these, they can become inflammatory in our bodies. So they're not bad oils, but we generally consume too much of them, and that is what becomes bad. And then monounsaturated fats, these are the good guys, right? These are canola oil, avocado oil, olive oil, nuts, fish. These are the good oils. They have good effects on our good cholesterol. They dial down our bad cholesterol. So the orange is the saturated fat. The green, this is the really good guy. The light green is the really good guy, monounsaturated fats. And then the kind of not bad but not great is the polyunsaturated fat content. So all oils have a little bit of everything in them. They range in the amount of the different kinds of fats in them. And what's not shown on here is they also range in the amount of polyphenols in them, or other bioactive compounds that also exert really good health benefits. That's not shown here, but I'll talk about that a little bit. So the American Heart Association says move to polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. But like for my money, I want to be right here, right? Where we've got the really long green lines, right? And those are your canola oil, avocado, olive oil. I included sesame on here. It doesn't have like a better profile, but I think it does a lot of interesting things like culinarily, so I kept it on there. That's kind of where I like to live. Flaxseed oil isn't on that chart, but of all of the oils that I just talked about, the flaxseed oil has the highest omega-3 content by like 7, which is nuts. How many of you guys have seen this on social media lately? That seed oils are really bad. Who was just talking about that? Were you just saying something about that? Yeah. How I know that things are really reaching the public is when my like 70-year-old dad asked me about them. So I know this one's out there. He's like, what do you know about seed oils? I'm like, I didn't think, okay. All right, so this is all over social media. This is our new like nemesis. And you know, they're saying that seed oils like canola, safflower, sunflower oil, they're responsible for all of inflammatory everything, obesity, diabetes, like you name it. And people are like, I pulled all these out of my diet, good to go now. And there's not evidence to suggest this is true. There is evidence to suggest if you stop eating a bunch of processed food where this is found that you might start feeling better. There's absolutely evidence for that, right? But that these by themselves on their own are not good. It's not there. And I want to say something about this. So I've worked in a lot of restaurants in my life. A lot. These oils are refined. And what refinement means is that you take things out of them so that you can cook them at a higher heat. Restaurants and stuff are using, and restaurants and factories are cooking with oil constantly. And they're using a high heat oil that's going to stand up to that process over and over again. Because oil, as you know, is very expensive, right? It's tough to replace. They don't want to do it. They're going to push it till the end. And the problem is when you start doing that is you start breaking down oils and you start releasing a lot of compounds that aren't good, that cause human health problems. So I'm not talking about that though. I'm talking about cooking in your own home. You should feel fine and safe if you choose to choose canola oil, grapeseed oil, and any of these oils to use at home in cooking. They're fine, they're affordable. If I was to say, like, and you're trying to choose oils for your home, the best neutral oils that don't have flavor, like avocado oil, canola oil, everyday use like olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. The best for flavoring are sesame and walnut, and the best for omega-3, but not this one, is flaxseed oil. There is a lot to be said or not about the different heat temperatures that I use. So the American Heart Association says don't deep fry at home, right? I do sometimes, but you know, to not break down an oil, you know, to think about the different process. If you're going to do something at really high heat, and by this I mean you have your oven cranked and you're trying to put a good sear on something, really good choice is avocado or canola. If you're just doing regular pan sauteing and sweating vegetables or something like that, olive is just fine. Avocado, canola, sesame. And then no heat, because you don't want to ruin it. It's a waste of that oil. It's a waste of those botanicals that are heat sensitive, is extra virgin olive oil, walnut, flaxseed, and sesame oil. You don't want to waste you don't want to spend money to waste those botanicals and polyphenols in there by just breaking them down with heat. They're really heat sensitive. This is such a good segue. Oxidation is probably what you tasted with that flaxseed. It's really important to take good care of your oils, because when oils start to break down and turn into something else, that's called oxidation. And what causes that is light, heat, and oxygen. So what I wanted you to do was recognize what a rancid oil smells like. I read a study that grossed me out that Americans actually prefer a little bit of rancidity on their olive oil. So I have an oil here that was in my pantry, which is super embarrassing. And I want you to smell it. And I hope that you're not going to have something that's this far gone. This oil is not even oil anymore. It is completely turned. It smells like crayons. It's not gross. It just smells like crayons. It smells in a certain way. And that's what an oxidized fat smells like. So if you even get a whiff of this, you can throw that all, you can throw whatever that oil is away. But I just want you to be able to recognize that smell. If you can pass that around. This is a fully oxidized oil, but you want to prevent like any level of oxidation from happening and take really good care of your oils. Maybe not purchasing like the big tins of olive oil, because once you open it, you know, light's going to get in there. Or sorry, oxygen's going to get in there. So buying in smaller quantities might be a better thing to do. Store it in a cool, dry place, right? Never reuse it. Don't do that thing that the factories does and bring your oils up and down. That's not a good thing to do. That's not taking care of your oils. And then there's certain oils, the flaxseed, sesames, walnuts, that should go in the fridge. I'm finding a lot of oils actually tell you where to put them now, which is really nice.
Thank you for viewing this edition of HealthCheck 360. At Tomah Health, we're inspiring health, wellness, and balance for our community. To learn more about Tomah Health educational classes, visit our website at tomahhealth.org.